understand everything, two cases, and if you don't read at all, right? So, which is relevant in your case? Not reading at all? Okay. So, last class we were discussing about the proletariat revolution. Proletariat revolution, right? And this is a phase in which class in itself changes completely into class for itself. Class in itself is a stage of false class consciousness, means the wage earning class, the worker class, is not aware of their true situation. Class for itself is a situation which is characterized by homogeneity of working class, awareness of each other's condition, breakdown in the pluralistic ignorance, and moving towards a solidarity. And this whole stage comes in a natural way. As the material conditions of the society changes, the situation gets matured, it ripens, and finally a situation comes when proletariat revolution becomes a reality. That is the stage which is known as the period of proletariat revolution. One of the major flaws in our perception about Marx is that Marx envisaged that this proletariat revolution will be violent. We think that Marx envisaged that this proletariat revolution will be violent. Means proletariat class will violently overthrow the domination of the capitalist class. But actually that is not true absolutely. What Marx had said, that this revolution can be non-violent too. It can be non-violent too. Non-violent in the sense, when the situation arrives or the condition is such that proletariat class start feeling that no more we can have control over the forces of production and the property, and they release their domination on their own. They give up their control of the means of production on their own. Right? There are two types of action we can do in a difficult circumstance. One, resist that, and second is when we have come to realize that now the condition is inevitable. So on our own we give up our control over any property that we are possessing. Right? If that occurs, naturally all will be giving up their control, ownership of the property, and the property will be finally owned by the community as a whole. So in that situation, the revolution will be complete without violence. Revolution will be complete without violence. But if the capitalist class is not ready to give up their control over the property, then the revolution will turn violent. Right? So Marx talks about two outcomes, two consequences if capitalist class gives up their control over property voluntarily, realizing the inevitability of the revolution, in that situation the revolution will be non-violent, because in that situation proletariat class does not need to take any violent action. In case capitalist class does not give up their proprietorship over assets, revolution will turn violent. Revolution will turn violent. Right? Now, these are the two options, two possible consequences of proletariat revolution. One is non-violent, another is violent. Later on, Stalin, Mao, etc., they modified. They said, Mao said, if you look at the Maoist version of communism, Mao says, without class elimination, proletariat revolution will not be complete. Maoism. Modification of Marxian idea of proletariat revolution, right? And what was that? Without class elimination, without class elimination means without killing all those people who own the property, because they are not going to give up their control over the property on their own. Until they will be there, they will be adopting all mechanism, all possible recourse of the actions to keep the control over the property with them. Right? So, this is what he is saying, that unless until you eliminate them means kill them, things will not change, proletariat revolution will not be a reality and it will not be complete. Right? This is what the Maoist version, Maoism. In India, we talk about Maoism, right? And Naxalism is one of the Maoist expression of Maoist theory, one of the expression of Maoist theory, right? Now, this proletariat revolution, now let us assume, has occurred. We'll see whether it occurred or not. But let us hypothetically assume that 1917 Bolshevik revolution is an example of proletariat revolution, right? And once this proletariat revolution is complete or on completion, it will establish dictatorship of proletariat, which is also known as socialism or socialist state. Means state still exists. State owns the property, and all other people, all the members and citizens of the state are proletariats. Right? Once the dictatorship of proletariat is established, means the concept of private property is being eliminated completely. Whatever assets that are present in the society, that is owned communally. Communal ownership, state is expression of community. State is nothing else but expression of community. The only thing is that we talk about certain paraphernalia of government and bureaucracy. Right? In some situation, state doesn't have bureaucracy. In some situation, state have very minimum bureaucracy, and so on. But state is generally nothing but expression of the general will of the society, the common will of the society. Right? But Marxist explanation of state is different, as we have seen in the base superstructure metaphor. What Marx says, material condition is base. When the material condition improves or the forces of production develop, surplus production occur. And when surplus production occur, society gets divided into two antagonistic classes. One is dominant class, another is subordinate class. Dominant class always faces a situation where they anticipate rebellion from the subordinate class. Because subordinate class is exploited. So whenever we talk about rebellion, rebellion is always from that portion of the society which is exploited. Right? So dominant class, they are into a kind of fear of rebellion from the subordinate class. Now if they apply only force containing the rebelliousness of the subordinate class is not possible, only by force. So what they do, they create certain superstructure. The dominant class create certain superstructure to condition subordinate class to accept their condition as legitimate and natural. Once you start considering your own subordinate situation as a natural thing, acceptable, justified, nothing unjustified, rebelliousness will definitely decrease. And after that, only a few people will be sometimes deviating from the norms of the society or rebelling against the exploitation. A few rebellions of a few people can always be controlled by force. So first thing is that they create a situation where the subordinate class accepts their condition as natural, nothing unjustified. And in this pursuance, the superstructures like family, religion, state, they work for the dominant class. Right? Because the state frames the rule. Suppose the state has framed the rule of proprietorship. Now, the rule of proprietorship, it protects the interests of proprietors, not the workers. That he has purchased this, he has worked on this, so he owns this or that property. And there is a rule for that. So this rule is nothing else but to protect the interest of the proprietor class or the dominant class. Similarly, religion acts as an opium to masses because it provides them the tolerance capacity, accept their poor condition as natural. So all these superstructures were created to perpetuate the domination of the dominant class. When there is no dominant class, what's the use of such superstructure? Right? Write down. During primitive communism, there was no concept of private property. There was no concept of private property. Hence, there was no class divide. Hence, there was no class divide, and therefore, no need of institutions like state, no need of institutions like state, religion, family, etc. With the emergence of concept of private property, society got divided into two antagonistic classes. The dominant and the subordinate. The dominant and the subordinate. The subordinate class was exploited or were exploited. The subordinate class were exploited at the hands of dominant class, which gives rise to possibility of rebellion too. It is very difficult for dominant class to suppress the rebelliousness through force alone. So they erect certain institutions like state, family, religion, etc. Family and religion through the process of socialization, culturally conditions the subordinate class to accept their condition as natural and just, thereby reducing the rebelliousness. Even after that, if some people deviate from the dominant class norms, state gets the power to punish them. and control them. Thus, state as an institution, is the creation of the dominant class to provide legitimacy to their rights over property and contain and suppress rebelliousness. After the success of proletariat revolution, there will exist only one class, that is proletariat class, hence there won't be any antagonism, and therefore institutions of superstructure will lose their function. Gradually, these institutions will wither away. And finally establishing communism. Which according to Marx will be the end of the history. Means this is something like the theory of evolution. Evolution says if we lose the function of our little finger, in a million years from now, million is a very small period for evolution, we will not have this little finger. When we were in the primate stage, we had tail. Today we don't have, because we have lost the function of tail. Right? Similarly, if a state and other institutions lose their function to maintain the domination of the dominant class, why would they exist? They will gradually wither away, and finally a situation will come where these institutions will be completely destroyed, and there will exist communism. And that communism, he says, is anarchic social order. Anarchy means lawlessness. You don't need any law. And that theory of Kant becomes reality when he says, every man should be governed by the law that he gives to himself. Like the primitive communism. But at the empirical level, we want to see the difference between socialism and communism. Right? During socialist mode of production, there will exist the concept of property, not private property. But this property will be owned by the community as a whole, and this community as a whole is represented by the state and its machinery, right? Means still there exists a class, and that class is proletariat class. The state is the owner of the property, all are the workers. Even the erstwhile capitalists will turn into proletariats, into the workers, and they will work. Now when you are working in the industry, because Marx also envisages that this socialist society will also be industrial society. He did not say that will be regressive as far as technology is concerned. Even he assumes or accepts that technological development are progressive in nature, forward marching. So that society will be industrial society. When it is industrial society, even communist society will be industrial society. Something will be produced, right? What we call generally as in economic terms GDP. Now how will this GDP be distributed among the workers, right? During socialist phase of production, the guiding principle of distribution of the produce will be each according to need and each according to ability. Each according to need and each according to ability, right? Each according to need, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of each according to ability, and what are the consequences, right? So suppose the overall GDP is of 100 rupees. What he says, 50%, so to say hypothetically, it may be 60%, it may be 70%, it may be 40% too. We are not going into that figure. Certain percentage of that will be spent on the community activity, right? A part of the overall produce of or production of the society or community will be spent on community needs. Community needs means hospitals, roads, parks, educational institution, and so on, right? Which will have access by all the people equally. I will not have to pay anything to travel on the road. If I need to travel on the road, I will travel as much as possible. If I fall sick, primary health care or the even secondary health care will be available to me. Parks will be there, educational institutions will be there, and all those activities that are required. That is the need, a primary or basic need of human being. Individual will not have to crave for that. The state will be responsible. The state means community as a whole will be responsible to provide those basic amenities. After that, a certain percentage will be left, right? So rest will be distributed among the people or workers as per their contribution. As per their contribution. As per their contribution. So in erstwhile USSR, there was a restriction. A professor can have 2 pair of shoes. 3 pair of suits. He could have a car. But clerk did not have the power to keep more than 2 suits with them. All this was decided on a theoretical level on the basis of how much you are contributing in the GDP. What is your contribution in the overall production of the society or in an organization? That means what? If the worker is given as per his contribution, means the worker is still treated as a commodity. Worker is still treated as a commodity. His labor, what we had said earlier, labor is the creative aspect of a human being. That labor is being attached with certain objective value in terms of their contribution. Means the creative aspect of human being is still being treated objectively. Right? Because we are weighing his contribution on the basis of output. We are weighing its contribution on the basis of his output, not his intention. Right? That means still labor is being objectified, commodified, and when labor feels commodified, is treated as a commodity, alienation for Marx, even a little alienation of the labor class should be done away with, otherwise man will remain dissatisfied. Are you getting it? What will happen? This socialism will gradually, what he had said, socialism will be a transitory phase and it will give way to communism. And how do you define communism? You can define communism by removing this part of the guiding principle. Each according to need. Each according to need. You will get what you need, and then human being will be very happy, or at least the present man will be very happy. हमें कुछ करना नहीं पड़ेगा, हम जो चाहेंगे मिलेगा. नहीं? We will get whatever we want and we don't need to do anything, because community will be giving us what we need. Actually, this is a misinterpretation of the human nature. What is human nature? If I want to realize that human nature, we can understand it from a well organized nuclear or joint family. In a family, there are parents and children, right? Now you were also child, and when you were getting felicitated in your schools or colleges, so what your eyes were searching in the crowd that is sitting in front of you? Parents. Why? Actually, the value of that appreciation lies in the feeling of happiness of the parents. You want to see happiness on the face of your parent, because you are not studying, you are not achieving that for yourself, rather you are doing that to give respect, honor, a sense of pleasure, happiness to your parents. Means you are doing your best, but the outcome you are putting that, you are allocating the outcome to your parents. Your parents earn. And what do? Do they spend all the money on themselves? Rather, they compromise on their own pleasure. पहले बच्चा खा लेगा, तब मैं खाऊंगा. If both children and parents require institutional care, health care, first children will be given, later parents will be given. Even if the parents are given, there is a consideration that if I die, who will take care of my children? The consideration is different. So in a well settled, well established family, well organized family, all give their best on their own. The moment you start working for yourself, you can never give your best. If you work for others, if you work for the society or the community to which you belong, you will be acting in a selfless manner. You will be doing what you can do the best. Right? So if you are doing your best, what's the responsibility of the society? To give what you need. But here is the issue that you will not need anything that does not satisfy your creative need. Right now we are working for money. Right now we are working for money. In that situation we won't work for the money. We will be working to satisfy the creative aspect of our life, our personality. That's internal, that's voluntary. You are doing something which is voluntary. From inside, from within you, naturally you will be giving your best. That output will be the best in those circumstances. So, society will provide. You will not like to eat anything that is useless as far as your creative needs are concerned. Definitely we can envision such a situation, like a family where the individual is doing what he wants to do. If you are doing what you want to do, you will be doing your best. If you are preparing for civil services for the sake of money and power, you are likely to compromise your effort. But if the wish to become civil servant comes from within, divine, Kantian, आधा खा के भी चलेगा, लाइट नहीं है तब भी पढ़ेगा. You are giving your best. Society in return will give you back what you need, because you won't need something more than what you require. That was a situation that was envisioned by Marx, and that is called alienation. Here in this situation, you are no more wage earner, classlessness. Here still a class exists. Here complete classlessness. No alienation. Non-alienated human being. I hope now you understand the difference between socialism and communism. In socialism, still class exists, a single class exists, and this class feels alienated, definitely lesser, much lesser than the capitalist society, but the working class is still alienated, that the human being is still not feeling itself completely humane. But once communism is established, you are not working under any external constraint, not for money, not for power, not for prestige. You are doing what gives you satisfaction on the basis of intuition, to satisfy the creative aspect of your personality. That will make you happy. What makes you happy, you are likely to do more and more. What makes you happy, you are likely to do more and more. Willingly. Because you are not acting under any external pressure. So you will be giving your best. But at the same time, society will provide you, the community will provide you what you need. This is called communism, which is branded as a utopian concept. Right? It's an imaginary concept. Marx thinks of a situation which is full of imagination, an ideal type, a utopian stage in society. Right? Now we are going to talk about relevance of Marxism in contemporary society. The structural level there is certain differences. Primitive communism, the forces of production are undeveloped. In communism, as I said, it will be still industrial society. So forces of production are developed. In a way, you will find primitive communism not as a voluntary classlessness. You do not have choice. Here you have the choice, but still you are living in a classless society. That's the two bigger difference between the primitive communism and communism. Everything will be wither away. You don't need. In fact, Marx explains that even if we are monogamian, this monogamy has nothing to do with the sexual preferences. Rather, it has to do with the concept of private property. In modern capitalist society, the concept of property, private property, is very strict. And all capitalists want to transfer their property to someone who belongs to them. And this is possible only in a monogamian family. Right? So, size of the family constricted with the strengthening of the concept of private property. In primitive communism, we had consanguineous family. Right? Now we come to relevance of Marxism in contemporary society. Relevance of Marxism in contemporary society. Right? Okay. A very simple question. When would we think of relevance about any institution or any theory? Pani do. When does this question of relevance arise? What are the conditions in which the relevance of Marxism arises. There is a doubt in the integrity of the theory. There is another condition also. A new theory becomes relevant when you remain dissatisfied with the you remain dissatisfied with the existing social order. So in the beginning of 20th century, Marx was relevant. Marxism was relevant because the whole of the proletariat class were a highly exploited lot. They were feeling confined within the framework of capitalist mode of production, and they were trying to come out of it, because whatever benefit of industrialization or modernization was occurring, that was being appropriated by the capitalist class. Then you talk about relevance. Yes, it is relevant because it will create awareness among the masses. They will go for collective solidarity, collective mobilization will occur, and under the collective mobilization and leadership, things will have to change. But in 21st century, when we are talking about the relevance of Marxism, then this is related to a question mark on the integrity of the theory or the empirical reality of the theory. Now, what are the events that have given rise to a question mark over the communist theory or the communism or Marxism? What are the events? Soviet, destruction of USSR, erstwhile USSR, right? Even before that, in 1970s, China had also started liberating its economy. As far as liberalization of economy is concerned, China started it 2 decades earlier than India. 1973-74, the period that is also characterized by oil crisis or oil shock. China is politically communist, but economically it is capitalist. And the level of corruption in China is higher than India, much higher than India. Though Transparency International might talk in a different manner, but Chinese society is a very closed society, so even these international voluntary organizations are not getting the true information about the Chinese society. It is so closed, right? It blocks the Google itself, the whole internet, Facebook. That doesn't happen in India. So China started liberating in 1970s. Then in 1989, USSR, erstwhile USSR, that became defunct, right? And many nationalities emerged, and Russia itself adopted a democratic and capitalist regime, democratic polity and capitalist economy. Erstwhile East European communities, Czechoslovakia and others, they fell and they went also for capitalism and democracy. 90s is also characterized by liberalization, privatization and globalization policies of India. 80s witnessed the rise of Asian tigers, South Korea, that too through the liberalization and privatization and globalization of their economy. So in the last 40 years, the events have unfolded in such a way that has given rise to question mark over the theory of Marxism and the idea of communism itself. Right? Write down. The issue of relevance of Marxism, has cropped up due to cropped due to the developments in the last quarter of 20th century. From 1970 onwards, China started liberating its economy in 1989. Erstwhile USSR collapsed and many nationalities emerged all of which adopted a democratic polity and liberal economy. Following the events of USSR, the East European communist countries also adopted democracy and capitalism. The fall of Berlin Wall. The collapse of bureaucratic Stalinist regimes of USSR. The fall of Berlin Wall. The collapse of bureaucratic Stalinist regimes of USSR and Eastern Europe provoked a wave of euphoria in the West. It was heralded as the end of socialism. The final victory of the free market. Was trumpeted from the pages of learned journals trumpeted from the pages of learned journals from Tokyo to New York. Tokyo to New York. Francis Fukuyama. I don't know who exactly is this person, right? But anyway, Francis Fukuyama, he was a Japanese definitely, went so far as to proclaim the end of history, that is the end of the very idea of class war and communism. Class war and communism. What Marx had said? Communism will herald the era of end of history. This person, in a jingoistic fashion, he is saying, in satirist way, he is saying, satirical way, that with this fall of Berlin Wall, collapse of USSR, adoption of market economy by East European communist countries, and so on, actually it is the end of the history of communism itself, end of the history of the theory of communism. Means we don't need any more to talk about this communism. Let us end the talk over that. Means communism as a theory and communist society as a regime has failed to take off. It is utopia. It has become completely non-relevant. This is what they are saying, right? We want to discuss this relevance from a slightly different angle. Now, Marx envisages a kind of communism. Now, we ask a question. Was USSR, bureaucratic Stalinist regime, East European country or China are the true representative of the Marxist communism or not? So, when it was not established, where is the question of failure arises? Right? You will find two streams of thought. The believer of capitalism, the supporter of capitalism, they say they were truly representative of communism because they have to celebrate its failure. Those who support the capitalistic ideology, they accept erstwhile USSR a truly communist regime in Marxist sense. But hardcore Marxists, staunch supporters of Marxism, they say they were not truly representative of Marxist communism. So, the whole idea of its failure is farce. Right? Secondly, they are saying, let us analyze the history of capitalist economy in the last 100 years. We talked about various processes yesterday: concentration of capital, centralization of capital, falling tendency of rate of profit, pauperization, etc., etc. We have many figures with us that was written by a person called Mark Glick in his book The Current Crisis. The name of the book is Current Crisis, and he has shown, I will be dictating all those things, that 100 years back in 1890, the average rate of profit of corporates was 22%. 1890, around 1890-93, because this article from which I am teaching you, this article was published in 1994 based on the writings of Leon Trotsky, a hardcore communist, a hardcore Marxist. And in 1993-94, this rate of profit, the average rate of profit, has come down to 10%. In 1890, around, I will see the exact date, whether it was 1887 or 1891 or 90, it was 22%. Today it is 10%. Right? If you look at the history of capitalism earlier, what you will find that there were relatively a large period of prosperity and a small period of recession. But 1974 onwards, usually there is small period of prosperity or economic boom in the capitalist country USA and a larger period of recession. The current recession that is occurring in USA, it started in 2008 and it is still continuing almost 8 years. The Great Recession of 1927 even did not last for that long. If you look at the unemployment rate in USA, you will find that currently the unemployment rate is as high as 12%. The figure might change, right? Figure keeps on changing, which organization is giving. This person is saying 12%. So the size of reserve army is swelling. Reserve army was a concept that was used by Marx to refer to the unemployed workers, those who does not find work. Then this person says, on the one hand, the people who have got employed, they work too long, giving rise to many kind of psychiatric problem. On the other hand, there are a large number of people who are put in enforced leisure because they are unemployed. Generally what happens today, one who gets employed, he has to work for 16 hours a day. The company could have employed 2 persons, each working for 8 hours. Instead, one who gets the employment, who gets the job, he is put under undue pressure of large working hours or long working hours. And those who do not get the job at all, they enjoy enforced leisure. For every 1 yen earned in Japan, Japanese owe 1.7 yen. For every dollar that American earn, they owe $1.02. Means their income is less and the loan is more. EMI economy, deficit financing, right? So all these situations are indication enough that Marx and Marxian prediction has still cannot be said to be failed, rather it is going to be true, if not in the immediate future, in the near future. So who knows, 100 years from now, the rate of profit of these corporate sectors will be as low as 0.01% to 0.02%. Who will work? Taking so much pressure. right? So they will on their own voluntarily give up their control over the property. So hardcore Marxists say the time has still not arrived for true proletariat revolution. So there is no question of Marxian idea of communism failing. We expected that Marx gave his theory in 1883 and immediately within 20-30 years it will be reality. But Marx had also said one thing: if the material conditions are not mature enough for proletariat revolution will not occur. This was modified by Lenin. Marx talked about leaderless revolution. Lenin modified. That was the first change in Marxist theory, when Lenin said, without leader, revolution is not possible. Right? Right on. The discussion on the issue of relevance, the discussion on the issue of relevance the discussion on the issue of relevance of Marx remains elusive, E-L-U-S-I-V-E, and incomplete without the debate within inverted comma where USSR and East European countries comma, their politico-economic setup truly representative of the Marxist communism. There are two contradictory standpoints. One, by the supporters of capitalist ideology. And number two, by the supporters of capitalist ideology, and number two, the hardcore Marxist. For the hardcore Marxist, these countries were never the true representative of Marxist communism. Leon Trotsky, L-E-O-N, Leon, T-R-O-T-S-K-Y, Leon Trotsky, while analyzing the bureaucratic regime, of the Soviet Union, in 1930s, explained the inevitability of its collapse. He argued that first Stalinism and socialism so far being identical, Stalinism and socialism so far being identical, are mutually exclusive. The regimes in the USSR, the regime in the USSR and its Eastern European satellites were in many sense opposite of socialism. Trotsky argues a nationalized planned economy. Trotsky argues a nationalized planned economy needs democracy. As the human body requires oxygen. A nationalized planned economy needs democracy as the human body requires oxygen. Without democratic control and administration of the working class, a regime of nationalization and planning, without democratic control and administration of the working class, a regime, REGIME, of nationalization and planning would inevitably cease at certain point. Especially in a modern sophisticated and complex economy. The fact is reflected in the falling rate of growth. The fact is reflected in the falling rate of growth of the Soviet economy since the early 1970s after the unprecedented success during the early period. While explaining the trajectory of capitalism, Trotsky explains its growth story. Trotsky explains its growth story. Now, what we are going to say about that certain historical events about capitalism and its trajectory of growth. We know, all of you should have known about that there was a period 1929 to 1932 that is known as the period of Great Recession or Great Depression, right? And 32 onwards, the capitalist economy in US started growing. It was not that they never faced any crisis, but the crisis was very short and the prosperity was relatively long. Trotsky attributes certain reason for this growth story till 1974. Right? In 1931, there was an economist who got the Nobel Prize, Keynes, right? Keynesian economics, he talked about two things. One, deficit financing. Deficit financing, right? And secondly, state capitalism. He said state should invest in the development of infrastructure. And secondly, he said make the availability of loan to the people easily so that their purchasing power increases. So to tide over the Great Depression, these two theories worked good for the American economy, right? That led to growth of the economy of America to deficit financing first and second state capitalism, that is called, right? The state investing in the infrastructural development, creating employment opportunity, purchasing power, and that's why acting as a vehicle for the development of indigenous industries. Second, he says that during Second World War, a number of new technology were invented. Laser technology, computer technology, right? Certain chemical technology, synthetic yarns, etc., etc. So, invention of these technology also led to the growth of the economy and the rising employment opportunity. During the World War II, a lot of destruction had occurred. So, post-World War II, economic reconstruction that also helped in the growth of the US economy or the capitalist economy because of the reconstruction activity. So, these developments led to the growth of the capitalist economy between 1931 to 1974. The first serious crisis that US economy faced was that in 1974, that is also the year of formation of OPEC, right? Oil producing, what is the full OP? Exporting countries, right? OPEC. And that led to oil shock when the prices of the petroleum products rose tremendously, right? And that created recession in the US economy. That was the first serious problem that US economy faced after 1929-32 period of Great Depression. But during that period, this period of recession was quite long, right? To improve the economy, what they did, they started proliferating the idea of globalization of economy. This led to increase in the global trade. This led to increase in the global trade. Means there was no spurt in the manufacturing sector, but the US economy grew after that 1980 onwards because of increase in the global trade. But soon it again matured. So in 1989 onwards, they again through IMF and various other institutions like World Bank, they put pressure on the developing nations like India to go for globalization. But that has also reached to plateau very soon. And in 2008 we are facing since that a Great Depression. If you look at the whole of the world economy, now China is also showing that sign of debacle, right? US economy is not recovering. Greece economy is in problem. There is rise of trade union movement in Spain, Greece, Portugal, etc. Even in India to an extent, right? Right now we are harvesting the demographic dividend, right? So all these are creating, and the situation has come where the capitalist economy is taking its last breath, according to him, Trotsky, not according to me. And then he shows those data. What are those data? We'll see that. Right. If you plan without democracy, you will never plan for the people as a whole. I don't know Fabian socialism, what is that? Mixed economy. Slow changes. I am not aware, so I can't say anything about that. Right. According to Trotsky, the Second World War ended in a revolutionary upsurge. In the period 1943-47, the working class moved time and again to transform society in Italy, France, Greece, Britain, Denmark and Eastern Europe. But the betrayal of the revolution, by Stalinism, totalitarian था वो, एब्सोल्यूट कंट्रोल था वो. He was actually enjoying his own power. Stalin had killed many people in the name of communism. What is the idea? That is called behaviorist. Utilitarian principle. What does utilitarian principle says? We should adopt a policy that provides greatest happiness to greatest number of people. Now by the same token it is interpreted, if a few people, a section of the society is to be exploited for the better life of the rest of the population, That is called majority hegemonism. And in the name of that, he had killed a number of Jews too. Right? But the betrayal of the revolution by Stalinism and social democracy provided the political basis for recovery of the equilibrium of capitalism. This was the prior condition for the economic upswing. This was the prior condition for the economic upswing of the West from which lasted from 1948 to 1974. Upswing of the West which lasted from 1948 to 1974. This economic upswing provided for the superiority of capitalist ideology over socialist ideology. Marxists provide following reasons. Of the economic upswing. Number one, post-war reconstruction. Post-war reconstruction. Second, discovery of new industries. During the war, plastic, atomic energy, computers, transistors, lasers, robots, etc. Third, increased involvement of the state through arms expenditure, deficit financing, and nationalization. Fourth, unprecedented expansion of world trade. Between 1950 and 1991. During this period, exports grew by 12 times. while output grew by only 8 times. While output grew only by 8 times. 1991 onwards, the global trade slowed. Reaching to its limit. The period of capitalist expansion, not the third para chain write down, the period of capitalist expansion came to an end the recession of 1973-74. The period saw, number one, the period saw 1973-74. The period saw first re-emergence of mass unemployment, number two, big movement of working class, in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy and Britain. Third, relatively weak periods of boom. And long periods of recession. Relatively weak periods of boom and long periods of recession. Fourth, increase in indebtedness of the people, For example, for every 100 yen earned, in Japan, people owed 170 yen. Fifth, the rate of profit of corporate groups. For every 100 yen earned in Japan, people owe 170 yen. Fifth, the rate of profit of corporate groups, are continuously falling in the last 100 years. And within this fifth point, write down, in the book The Current Crisis, Mark Glick, M-A-R-K, Mark, G-L-I-C-K, Glick, in 1987 analyzed the long-term rate of profit in USA. In 1899, before saying this, I want to say something, that whenever such type of question comes, just do not copy me, right? This is one block of information with you. right? I'll be saying the other dimensions too, but based on these dimensions, you do also search on the net a few articles, or while reading the articles, etc., in the newspapers, anywhere, try to extract one or two more points. Based on all these points, develop your own view, right? When you are writing the answer, you should write as if you are writing, right? Now, on any issues in sociology, you are expected to have opinion, because these are the open-ended questions. Means your answer should show some amount of conclusiveness, that you are concluding something, and when you are concluding, it means you are having some opinion. Opinion means decisiveness, conclusion. What you need to do on these issues, you develop your own opinion. Now this is, you should take this as my opinion. You don't make my opinion exactly as your opinion. Try to develop your own opinion also. These information, if you are having the opinion that Marxism has not failed, then corresponding evidence you should provide, right? So all these data means one person can have one opinion, another person can have opposite opinion. You can have opposite opinion than me. The only thing is that whatever opinion you have, you should try to substantiate it. किसी ने कहा होगा, you might have read in some studies, you might have come across certain data that will show innovativeness, improvisation, right? Okay, in 1899, the average rate of profit was, in 1899, the average rate of profit was, कार्तिकेय मिल के जाना, 22% of business houses, which has come down to 10% in 1983. What is this indication? Which has come down to 10% in 1983, falling tendency of rate of profit, right? Within that, in the same book, it has been found that 9/10 of the US economy, 9/10 of the US economy is in the hands of, 9/10 of the US economy is in the hands of top 500 companies, top 500 companies, and 80% of that is, in the hands of 100 biggest. 100 biggest. A similar trend exists in Britain. This is what concentration of capital is occurring, right? Next, write down, while millions of unemployed, next point, while millions of unemployed, and this is very crucial to Marxian, that idea, when he says capitalism is incapable of providing full employment. Why? Rate of return. Why the rate of return will decrease? See, there is a very simple calculation by mass. What happens? If the labor creates value worth 100, right? Out of this 100, 50 transferred to labor and 50 remains with the capitalist. What capitalist will retain will not create purchasing power. If the whole is transferred to the labor, labor will consume and that will create complete demand in the market and that will lead to employment. Since you are reducing the purchasing power of labor, so some people will have to remain unemployed क्योंकि जरूरत ही नहीं है उनके काम की, right? I don't. While millions of unemployed languish, L-A-N-G-U-I-S-H, languish in conditions of, while millions of unemployed languish in conditions of enforced leisure, the other millions with a good luck, the other millions with a good luck to remain at work find themselves subjected to ever increasing pressures to work for long hours, with lower pay and worse conditions, putting great exertion to their nervous system and muscle power in the course of greater productivity, meaning more profitability. Greater productivity meaning more profitability to capitalist, right? This is what we have discussed based on the article. Now we want to apply our own mind to understand the relevance of Marxism in the contemporary society. Now, what we are finding that there is one part that if you look at the changes in the capitalist world in the last 100 years or more than that, there was one segment of countries or states, they were adherents to the ideology of communism and Marxism, right? And that those countries might have harmed themselves, but they have greatly benefited the working class of the capitalist countries. They have given rise to awareness and consciousness of the situation. The collective mobilization has occurred. Not only this, the capitalist class has also anticipated the trouble. And in that situation, they have provided concession to the working class by amending the labor laws. right? Now the issue is, we can say, we can conclude in this way, that because of the Marxism, labor laws to protect the interest of the laborers came into existence in the capitalist society. If Marx would not have been there, such laws would not have been there. Means laborers would not have developed consciousness on their own. We may conclude that, but we don't want to conclude that. It may have happened that such consciousness would have come but very late. What is the contribution of Marx and Marxist theory? It has expedited the process of arousal of such consciousness among the working class. At least a few generations have been saved from the exploitative tendency of the capitalist regime. Right? This is one. Secondly, when you consider Marxism has failed, you start considering also that there is no place in academia for Marx and Marxist theory. If you start believing that Marxism has failed, it is a utopian concept, it is non-empirical, practically impossible, and in fact it is deteriorating for the society. Naturally, a society will not like to keep Marx and his theory in the academic curriculum. The moment it is removed from the academic curriculum, a great pressure that exists on the capitalist class to provide concession to the working class, that will be removed. At least the prevailing ideology is acting as a check and balance, reducing the exploitative tendency of capitalism. Right? Right on. The relevance of Marxism, can be comprehended along a different dimension too. Along a different dimension too. It will be completely inappropriate. It will be completely inappropriate to say that without Marx and his contribution, the true consciousness would not have arisen in working class at all. But one can say with trust, that Marx and his theory has expedited the rise of awareness of working class worked for their collective mobilization and acting as a pressure point on the capitalist class to provide concession to the wage earners by enacting various social security measures. This has definitely saved many generations from the tyrannies of capitalism, whatever you pronounce, Tyrrany, tyrannies of capitalism. Parachan read on. The belief in non-relevance of Marxism will help remove Marx from the academic curriculum which will ebb means lower, which will lower the consciousness of the exploitative tendency of capitalism. Exploitative tendency of capitalism. Thus, Marx acts as a check and balance. In the capitalist regime between capitalists and proletariats. Right? So now I hope you can write. It's a very long one. You don't need to write that much. But accordingly you can write, if it comes, what are the contemporary relevance of Marxism, or what are the relevance of Marxism in contemporary period. The last contribution of Marx is that of Asiatic mode of production. Give the heading, Asiatic mode of production. Asiatic mode of production. Initially, when Marx was analyzing the historical materials of Europe, he believed about the linear or unilinear change of society. That means, like Comte, Marx also believed that every society will pass through the same stages. That is, first primitive communism, then ancient society, then feudal society, then capitalist society, and then socialist, and finally communism. But when he was analyzing the societies of India and China, reading about its history, then he found that there is not a single line of development of societies. Rather, there is another line of development of societies too. If you look at the Europe, then primitive communism, or what is known as tribalism, hunting and gathering, he says those stages were same for Asia and Europe. Means even in Asia, the Indian and Chinese society, the nature was tribalistic, hunting and gathering, a kind of primitive communism, absence of private property. And the same was the condition in Europe, ancient Greece and Rome, before preceding stage of ancient Greece and Rome. But what happened when the population grew in Europe? When the population grew in Europe, this led to emergence of the concept of private property with the surplus production. Means in Europe, the idea of the private proprietorship in land developed. The fencing was being done, demarcation, like lions, they demarcate their area. They don't fence but demarcate their area. Similarly, the groups, the families, they used to demarcate during that period. The laws were not like today. But there was a concept of private proprietorship of land. But when he reads the history of India and China, ancient history of India and China, and its historical materials they give, they say that the concept of private property of land never developed in India and China. Land was communally owned, right? Now Marx is oblivious of the exact reason of that, why it did not develop the concept of private property of land. There, a person was the absolute owner of a particular piece or area of land. Here, even the king was not the owner of the land. He was not the proprietor of the land. Anthony Giddens, in his book Capitalism and Modern Social Theory, he uses the term possessor. That king was merely a possessor of the land. We are talking about feudal era. I don't agree with the use of that word possessor, right? I am not saying he is wrong. I don't agree. I may be wrong. I can't say what Anthony Giddens has written. Maybe that my idea or knowledge about the meaning of possession is inadequate or incomplete. But as far as I am concerned, I am more interested in using the word custodian, guardianship. King in India, the tribal chiefs in India, they never owned the land. They were merely the custodian, the guardian of the land. In fact, the land was owned by the community as a whole. Right? What Marx says, I don't know the exact reason, but it seems that geography and soil condition, the climate, is responsible for that. Geography, climate and the soil condition. If you compare the Europe with India, what you find, there is a vast land that falls in the area of plain, right? The river valley civilizations. Whereas if you look at the Europe, relatively there is paucity of cultivable land. Though Anthony Giddens has not written, I am just guessing it, right? So that might be the reason that here it never developed, and because of the situation of climate and geography, a centralized government came into existence. A highly centralized government came into existence. a kind of authoritarian, he says, right. It means the stage of society that emerged in India and China had a different characteristic feature than the ancient society. That's why in India, slavery in the true sense of the term never developed. It means there is a different line of development. There is a different line of development in India. Right? Later on we will be reading about the self-sufficient village republics. Right? Now, then what were we giving to the tribal chiefs or the king? He said that it was not the share in the property. It was not the share in the property that was being given to the king. Rather, king was considered as the repository of God, and tribal belief is of such nature that they try to offer whatever they produce to their God. So it was like offering to the God, to these kings or similar position holders. Right? He also says that's why city states never developed in India, because there was no much competition. Now we trying to use that if the concept of private property of land did not emerge in India, feudalism in the European sense cannot come to existence. That's why in the case of India, Indian feudalism is termed by many as semi-feudalism. Can we say by the same token, Indian capitalism is semi-capitalism? Yes or no, that depends upon the opinion that you develop. So what I will do, I will give the handouts for this Asiatic mode of production to tomorrow, right? And tomorrow we will start with Email Durkheim. Thank you for today.